The South Carolina Hall of Fame was founded in Myrtle Beach in 1973 to recognize and honor contemporary and past citizens who have made outstanding contributions to South Carolina's heritage, history, and progress.
Who knew that the dean of 20th century American opera composers would be born in Latta, South Carolina, son of a Methodist preacher, and spend his formative years moving from small town to small town during the Great Depression?
My first interest in music came when I was about 3, because my mother was a pianist, and I thought it was pretty neat what she was doing on the piano, and so I told her that I wanted piano lessons too. When I was in college, I wrote songs. Almost all composers, for some reason that I've had anything to do with, tend to write songs the first things that they do. And so I think mine was, again, probably a little prophetic, because it was a way of combining words and music, and I'd always been almost equally interested in both.
In the early 1950s, as a music instructor at Florida State University, Floyd wrote his first full-length opera, Susanna.
It was suggested to me by a friend who was a graduate student in English and who was a would-be writer, and he wanted to do the libretto. It turned out that I think he must have had the fear of the blank page, because he never gave me any libretto at all. And so after a suitable number of weeks went by, I simply decided I would write it myself. I went to the dean of the School of Music there, and in retrospect, I think, where did I get that kind of brass? But nonetheless, I obviously had it at the time. So I told him that I had written a full-length opera, and that I wanted to offer it to him first, to be done at Florida State, but with the proviso that the 2 leads be professionals.
For the role of Susanna, the composer approached Phyllis Curtin, a leading American soprano.
And wonderful lady that she is, she said very, very quickly that she would be happy to do it. So I was in cloud 9 after that. And not only did it didn't stop there, she called Mac Harrell, who was one of our great operatic baritones at that time, and said, "Mac, there's a marvelous role for you here. I think you should have a look at it." And so we went over to his home. So the whole deal was completed in the space of a day or 2.
After Susanna's successful premiere in Tallahassee, Curtin campaigned for its presentation by the New York City Opera.
She was determined this opera was to be seen in New York. She was indefatigable, and of course I was too, and she would perform it for a producer and do all the parts if she had to, in addition to Susanna, including the chorus. You know, in retrospect, of course, I think the opera probably sold itself. But that's how it got done in New York, and then once it won the New York Critics Circle Award, then the opera was launched. There was a great deal of publicity connected with it. People said, "How did you get so much confidence?" And I said to them, you know, what did I have to lose? Because I had nothing to lose. Which was the last time I felt that way, I have to say.
From the beginning, Floyd wrote the music and the words for all his operas.
It's very unusual. I only know of 4 cases in all of operatic history that the librettist was also the composer. I mean, it's taken me all this time to really learn what this very special discipline involves, because it's not playwriting. It's not anything except libretto writing. It has aspects of playwriting, of course, and other things, but it's a very, very precise discipline.
Many of Floyd's operas, like Susanna, have a Southern theme.
It's fair to say that both in his choice of subjects and in his treatment of subjects, he has mined his own life. and in some cases almost subconsciously mined his genealogy. So the Southern element in his work is part of his DNA.
Another part of Floyd's DNA is his love of literature.
Carlisle has always been a voracious and insatiable reader, and these elements leap off the page, and he will find a way, if the story and its characters draw him, to make it his own. It's not so different from all of the great world theater, everything from Aeschylus and Sophocles to Shakespeare to our great 20th century dramatists that have moved him so much.
One of Floyd's 20th century adaptations is John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men.
I had digested the material, and I usually do that with any novel or play. I simply read them 3 or 4 times and feel that I've gotten all the juice I can get out of the carrot, and then I set them aside, and then I have to take over.
He looks at that wonderful arch that starts at the beginning and the end. He's already seen it. Sometimes he's probably seen the end before he sees the beginning.
Floyd's Of Mice and Men has an astonishing finale.
There's just Lenny and George. And George has the gun. And there's the bang. At that point, Lenny just slumps to the ground, and George is there. He just sits back. And all of the ranch hands start coming in, and they see what's happened, and they leave. And so the last thing you see is George sitting there just staring out at the audience. There's a wonderful, magical moment that you have sometimes, and it doesn't happen often. But you have done what you were put here to do, which is get the audience with you. And you've taken them on a journey. I personally feel it's Carlisle's greatest work.
Carlisle's most recent opera, Cold Sassy Tree, based on the novel by Olive Ann Burns, combines his Southern heritage with his love of literature.
Cold Sassy Tree is Carlisle Floyd at the height of his powers. A serious story with humorous elements, or if you like the reverse of that, a humorous story with serious human elements. It's a perfect blend that reflects his veneration for the greatest opera composers of all time.
Some of the greatest vocal talents of all time have been drawn to Floyd's works.
Every soprano I know that's looked at Susanna, they all want to do it because of the drama, the character itself, with the words and with that glorious music. And it's so lyrical. Carlisle never lost his lyricism. Never.
Carlisle Floyd has mentored the next generation of opera composers.
Jake Heggie and Mark Adamo both sought him out, and he generously gave them the benefits of everything he had learned up to that point. You can look at Dead Man Walking, and Carlisle's influence extends throughout in terms of how text and music work most effectively together.
Floyd is also a legendary pianist and piano teacher.
He studied with Rudolph Vikuzhny, the great Czech pianist, and Carlisle wrote his piano sonata, which was premiered at Carnegie Hall, specifically for Rudolph. He wrote 2 volumes of episodes for piano, very short works, but they are just little gems of compositional techniques. I just regret so much that he hasn't written more for the piano, but by and large, it's the opera.
Carlisle Floyd's reputation among the giants of opera composers is secure, evidenced by a showering of awards.
They crown a very long career. Verdi, I think, is quoted as saying, Well, if you live long enough, you begin to collect all kinds of recognitions. And so it's, in my case, that certainly has been true.
Carlisle is unique among American composers in the sense of the number of operas with which he has had success and his persistence in growing and changing and expanding his idiom. And it's always been a trade-off game with deciding who are you going to please, the audience or the critic. And Carlisle has finally gotten to a place in his compositional idiom where he can have his cake and eat it too.
You know, you're often asked, where does he stand now at the end of his life? And I think he's at the top. And I think long after I take my last breath, we'll still be performing Carlisle Floyd.